Hi there, my name is Simranpreet Saini with Century 21, your local real estate agent. And today, for this video, I'll be talking about how to strengthen your offer as much as possible to get it accepted, especially in today's market. So to really make your offer stand out in today's market, there's really only three things you need to do. The first is attach your will stating the house will be returned to seller or their heirs free of charge upon your passing. The second is include your firstborn child, even if they are now a full adult and have a family. The family and pet are included, by the way. A lot of people get that wrong, unfortunately. The family and pet have to be included. And the third thing is other basic things like your car, social security number, username and passwords to all bank and investment accounts must be included. As we know, there has never been a tougher time to get an offer accepted due to the high demand and low inventory. Buyers are paying way more for the same piece of property than they would have even just a couple of years ago. Every offer, virtually every offer, is above asking. And this is really feeding into the misconception that the highest purchase price is going to win. And that is simply not true. Although there is a correlation between the acceptance rate of an offer and its purchase price, that is not the only factor the sellers consider when choosing the best offer for them. You may have heard of the term highest and best. We obviously know what highest is referring to, but what does best mean? Best for who? Best in what sense? In short, the best offer is the one that the seller will ultimately choose. Now, I know that sounds like an obvious statement, but there are many things running through a seller's mind when they have all those offers to consider and they have to choose just one. Therefore, the best offer is the one that meets and or exceeds the seller's needs the best. And in order to do that, there are many more levers that can be pulled to make your offer the best without shelling out much more money above asking. Consider this scenario. Say you have a seller, an old couple who want to move back to Tennessee in with their eldest son and his family in just a couple days before Christmas so that they can gift to their grandchildren the presents that they bought. So they decide to list their property on the market the week of Thanksgiving. And within 1 or 2 days they receive a couple offers, another person's and yours. Let's say that the other person's offer is, say, 20 grand above asking. However, they require 3 weeks to do their buyer's due diligence and run all their inspections, and then another couple weeks to close. Bottom line, they're not going to get to Tennessee in time to give their grandchildren their presents. And then there is your offer, which is, say, only 5 to 7K above asking. However, you offer to close in 3 weeks, meaning you run your buyer's due diligence in 2 and then you take another week to close. And not only that, you put down a healthy earnest money deposit to give the seller some security that you're not going to bail. And you offer to pay in part their moving costs as well. So, which offer do you think they'll take? Yours, because it allows them to get back to Tennessee in time for Christmas, and you even offer to pay in part the moving costs. Now, is it a complete guarantee that they will choose your offer over the other one? It's not guaranteed. That's the sort of game that we will have to play when submitting offers, is that we really have to gauge, is that 10 grand difference worth more to them than the time that they can spend on Christmas Day with their grandkids? So as that simple hypothetical example illustrated, it's not only the highest offer that's going to win all the time. There are many factors that go into the seller making the decision, and there's a lot of emotions involved, as you can tell from that example. So what are some ways that you can make your offer stand out and be the one that gets accepted above and beyond just hiking up the price? It can really be broken down into 2 categories, contractual and non-contractual. Now, by contractual, I mean stuff that is specifically to the real estate purchase contract. Now, obviously, I won't be going over every clause imaginable that is modifiable. It's just to give you a little bit of an idea of what is possible. Some contractual things that can be done to increase the chances of your offer getting accepted is waiving some or all the prorations for the seller, meaning the seller doesn't have to reimburse you for that month's HOA dues, for example, or HOA transfer fee, or property taxes for that current year, rents, etc. Another thing that can be done is offering to pay for in full or in part the seller's closing costs. So in previous years, it's pretty typical for buyers to ask for some assistance from the seller for their closing costs. But if you can turn that around and give the seller some credit towards their closing, that could be appealing to them. Another thing that can be done is putting a larger initial earnest money deposit down and making it non-refundable from the very beginning. The typical earnest money deposit amount is usually about 1 to 2% of the purchase price, so if you can go above that, please do. Of course, the earnest money deposit actually goes towards paying for the house. It's not in addition to the purchase price. And I've actually made an entire video about the earnest money deposit specifically. I'll include a link somewhere up here. Just click up on the pop-up and it'll take you there. And I talk about the earnest money deposit specifically and what concerns to consider in regards to that when properly leveraging it. And another thing that you could do is pay for the title insurance, offer to pay for the title insurance. It's typical for the seller to pay for the title insurance, but again, a little sugar grain that you can add in there is you'll pay for the title insurance. Lastly, one of the riskiest things that could be done is waiving your right to cancel based on the buyer's due diligence or the appraisal and financing conditions. Now, I personally never recommend that you waive those rights. However, it is a possibility if you know to a reasonable degree of certainty the results of the contingencies prior to making your offer. For example, a more secure way to go about waiving your right to cancel based on the buyer's due diligence is to take a home inspector with you on the tour for the home when you go see it for the first time before we even make an offer. And so what that does is that allows the inspector to give you sort of a preliminary evaluation of the house and tell you if there's any major problems with the house that could come up during the actual inspection. And so if the inspector tells us that there really isn't anything concerning that he sees or she sees right now, then that gives us a more higher degree of confidence to waive that right because we don't anticipate finding some major costly expense during the actual inspection period. Now, of course, there is still risk attached to that. Maybe the inspector overlooked something and there actually is a major expense. And of course, we can go and ask the seller to cover the cost of that repair, but the seller is not obligated to do that and we can't back out or cancel a contract now because we've already waived the right, whereas before we could have. And just as an added bonus, another thing that's being thrown into offers to increase the acceptance rate is something called an escalation clause. Now, I know this is directly pertaining to, hiking up the purchase price, but it's something that you should still be aware of. It's pretty much a clause that says that whatever your highest offer on the property is currently will go X amount above that. Now, of course, you have to be careful. You need to include a ceiling on that, right? You have to say we'll offer, $10,000 above your highest current offer, not to exceed X amount. And again, I know that this is, directly relating to the purchase price, but it's still something to be aware of that you can leverage. Now, moving on to some non-contractual things that can be done to increase the chances of your offer being accepted. One thing that could be done is consider giving the seller what is called free seller's post-settlement occupancy, or more commonly referred to as free seller's rent back. And so say you have a Rep C that states that you get the house the day of recording. You and the seller would enter into this agreement. This agreement would allow the seller to stay an X amount of time after recording for free. This would be particularly appealing to the seller if they have a lot of stuff that they need to move out and they just need some extra time. Or maybe they're just not in town a lot and they need that extra time to move out. Or maybe they need to find a new house. They sold this one to you, so they need time to find a new house. And they can do all of that while staying in the house for free. Now, of course, in previous years, the buyer would actually charge the seller a rent to stay that amount of time after closing. However, with your offer, it's free to stay in the house, which makes it particularly appealing to the seller. And another neat thing for the buyer in this scenario is that you actually don't pay mortgage payments for a while. Now, of course, please check this with your lender. I'm not an approved licensed loan officer, but typically you pay your mortgage payments on the first of the month. And when you first buy the house, you actually don't pay until after the first full month after closing. And so say you closed on June 2nd, the first full month would be July. And so your first payment would actually be expected all the way on August 1st. And so by allowing the seller that extra time to stay in the house for free, you're not really paying any mortgage payments for that seller to stay in the house. Another thing that you can do is include a handwritten letter to the seller with your offer. Now, this might sound trivial or a little silly thing to do, but remember, the seller is going through just seas of offers, just ink and paper, checkboxes, all these contingencies, all these words to read through. It'll be a nice change of pace to see a human touch, some personality to the offer. And I'm not saying you have to include your entire life story on the letter. Just include honestly about how you love the home in detail and how you're going to take care of it. You can even go into detail about how your offer specifically takes care of the seller's problems and makes it more convenient for them. And to take that another step further, I could draft a cover sheet that outlines all of the strengths of our offer. That way they don't have to go through digging in our contract to find all the strengths. They have it at a glance, whereas all the other offers they would have to pretty much wade through all the verbiage. Now the last non-contractual way that I'll be talking about in this video to help boost your offer has to do with timing. Now if you are one of the first, ideally the first, to make an offer on a home, you can write in a response deadline that is well before the seller's own submission deadline. And so what that does is that it'll force the seller to respond to your offer, otherwise your offer is off the table. Now, if you made a strong offer from the very beginning, maybe even incorporating some of the things that I talked about in this video, the seller may not want to pass up your offer for the possibility of getting something better by their submission deadline. And so, fearing that they won't get something better, they will take your offer before your deadline expires. Now, of course, to make that work, you do have to be one of the first ones to make the offers. Because if there's already been a ton of offers that have come through, then your offer may not actually be the best that they've received so far, and so they won't be inclined to accept it. However, if you take action quickly, then there is a much larger possibility that the seller may be pressed or more convinced to accept your offer before yours is off the table. And with that, thank you so much for watching. I hope you found that content useful. We went over many ways that you could implement to help strengthen your offer, and there are many other ways as well that could be used. It's always tough to structure a deal, but between you and me, we can make it happen. Until the next video.